Hello guys, so welcome to another insightful session on my channel. And as I promised you, I've delivered. I've delivered. So now for those who are preparing for their 2023 applications, that is spring and fall intake, we are already beginning. So don't think you have enough time ahead of you. So let's get started. So without wasting much time, as I promised you, I have my Professor Lorette here, who is going to take us through, what we need to know from the, we call it from the inner room. Okay, from the inner room. You understand what I'm saying? From the inner room. So as I always do, I'll come with the intro and everything, but for now it is all about tada, energy. Let's go see. Alright guys, so welcome back to this insightful session. I'm so glad you stay glued to your screens, and I will plead that you take your notepads, and trust me, this is a special content on YouTube. I haven't seen any of its kind before, and you understand why I'm saying that. So fast forward, this session is about for us to know what is really happening in the admission and admission room. Okay, what goes into the admission and funding decision, and why do professors not reply our emails, and why do some reply, and what are they looking out for when we send them these emails? This is what they're going to capture, and some other subsequent issues that Prof will be willing to share with us. So first of all, I will ask Prof to introduce himself. I think he will do better justice than I do, because I talk a lot. I might add some unnecessary stuff. So Prof will capture it himself. So Prof, please, a brief intro.
Okay, thank you. My name is Tashoma Bebe. I am a professor of economics here. My job includes mentoring young people and teaching undergraduate as well as graduate courses. I am a former administrator at the high level in different universities. Right now, my job is mentoring young people. I think that's my calling, and I'm very happy to provide a little bit of detail as we go along. But I wish to tell you to begin with that I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody else except me. I'm representing myself. I wish to make that clear as we continue our program here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome, Prof. So that is that. So these are just subjective styles from his experience he has gathered over the years, and trust me, experience, bolding and underlined experience. Yeah. So Prof, without much ado, I want us to just hit the nail right on its head. So take us through what really happens in the admission room first before we come to the funding aspect. Admission, as I already discussed with you, what should applicants look out for to enhance their admission chances, and also what they should, consider. Basically, what they should consider is this state schools, Ivy League, in general, admission to US universities. What has been experienced so far to enhance their chances?
I wish to tell everybody that admission to any university has got, it's a two-step process. The first, obviously, is to be admitted to a graduate school, to the graduate school itself. The second is being admitted to the specific program to which you are applying, the specific degree program to which you are applying. Now, this process takes quite a bit of time. First, you have to make an application. Second, you have to wait for people to respond. Sometimes the timing is quite complicated. You don't know where people may be on vacation, or maybe school may be closed. By that I mean the university. And each university approaches this differently. And so I will take you through the process. Most of you probably know that already. But one thing you need to recognize is that wherever you may be, your degree is very important to you, but it may not be necessarily that important to the institution to which you are applying. So you need to keep in mind, number one, in the application process, that you have to be prepared, that you understand the requirements of that institution, and not only understand, but be able to communicate to the institution to which you are applying what the specific requirements of your current degree or education may have been. Now, as I have indicated, Each university approaches this differently. As you also know, some universities are public, some universities are private. As a result, you don't have a right to be admitted. You only have a privilege. So when you apply, please understand that you are seeking a privilege to be admitted to an institution. So the first step is to go look for a university that you are interested in. Second, look at programs that they may have that you may be interested in. And once you do that, identify where you need to be able to send the application material. Follow the instructions properly. If you don't follow the instruction provided, people will ask you to send or to make sure that you go back and do that again, and this kills quite a bit of time for you. So follow instructions, particularly in the United States. If you don't follow instructions, things become more complicated. So that's the first step. The second step is, as I indicated, know that you're qualified for the position, for the program that you're applying for. If the institution says to be admitted to the university, that's the first step. To be admitted to the university, you have to have, let's say, 3.0 GPA on a 4 basis. Do not try to apply with a 1.5 GPA. It's not going to work. It's only going to be a disappointment for you. It also does not save time. So in that sense, follow the instructions. In the United States, things don't get done because you have a friend or you have somebody you know. Everybody has to follow instructions and they have to follow procedures because everyone has a boss. Remember that when you apply. Let me stop at this point with regard to university admission. The second process in the admission step is admission to the program, the specific degree program. Now, once the graduate school admits you, then they send the folder to the department in which the program is housed. That department has its own criteria. It has its own qualification and standards. And so you have to pass the second element of this in terms of the decision that comes from the department itself. Now, in the department, at least in my department, each department may have different kinds of requirements and qualifications, standards. We would like to see, number one, the student satisfied the admission requirement to the university in the first place, the first stage. And secondly, does the student have the appropriate degree to be admitted to, let's say, to the economics program at our university here? And if so, what kind of courses did they take? And what kind of record does the student have? And what sort of educational standard has been attained? We look at these things. So that's the second part of admission. The third part in this process is for those students that are looking for funding in the form of assistance, in the form of graduate assistantship and graduate teaching assistantships. There are other requirements, and that is the student prepared to be able to, let's say, serve in the department in some capacity. In our department, we don't allow graduate students to teach, so there wouldn't be teaching assistants, but there will be graduate assistants that are assigned different duties. And if a candidate, for example, has had a job experience, we look at that very, very favorably. If an individual is exposed to certain practices in terms of the work they have done, appointments they have had, or service that they have rendered, we look at that in a very favorable way. And third, If the individual has another degree, for example, a graduate or other kind of degree that we feel is quantitatively oriented and thorough enough to be able to prepare that student, then we look at that even more favorably. And then we make a recommendation to the university that that particular student be awarded a graduate assistantship. That's how the admission process takes place.
Yeah, I think this is very comprehensive, so I'll be coming out with specific questions that my people would want to know. So, Prof, I think the admission process is well explained here, but with the funding decision, please, does GPA really matters or play an integral role above all the other requirements like statement of purpose, letters of recommendation, and writing sample and any other requirements the department is looking out for? Does GPA stand out among all these requirements, or GRE test? Let me blend the two.
The funding process is a little bit complicated. It's complicated because decisions are made at different points. Let's look at the department where the program is housed. The program, a major interest is to make sure that we have enrollment in the first place. To enroll more graduate students, we incentivize graduate students. That incentive, in some cases, comes in the form of graduate assistantship, which provides tuition, pays tuition, and so on and so forth. Now, so there is a self-interest in the department to be able to get that student to come. Now, what sort of student would be more attractive to us? If a student has majored, let's say, in economics in the past and is looking for a graduate degree in economics, obviously, then we look at that as a favorable element in the decision to fund this particular student, given that their record is outstanding and is good. Now, if a student can show that, then the possibility of funding with recommendation of funding is significant from the department point of view. At the university level, the funding is done on the basis of priorities. Universities generally have priorities. We're going to fund this program more than another program someplace else. And so the available pool of funds are designated, and those pools of funds are allocated to the different departments. In other words, almost like a quota, this department will get that much and so on and so forth. And where do those funds come from? Those funds come from the state. And so that's why it's complicated. The more funding comes from the state, the more available for the various departments to be able to allocate to students. So when funding is available, we allocate more graduate assistantships within the department. But when funding is cut, then the number of graduate assistantship is reduced similarly. That's how the funding is done.
So, Prof, so I think a follow-up to that. So, over the years, in a situation whereby an applicant is having a good teaching skills, good, professional experience or working experience, like he has taught, he has built a good resume, and the person is having, let's say, second class upper. When you say upper back in Africa, you know that to be less than 3.5. Then there is an applicant having 3.5 upwards, and also probably a good GRE score. Does that automatically means that you don't regard the person, the one in uppers SOP as a statement of purpose in other staffs? That's specifically. These are the quantitative variables that we can look at for in the application.
Yes, those are the quantitative ones, but there are also qualitative aspect to this. Some people present themselves much better than others, obviously. The letters that they write, in the letters, the capacity for that student to show that, number one, that they need funding, that they will not be able to go to graduate school without some kind of support. That is critical. Secondly, it becomes even more helpful if the student can convince the reader, those who are looking at the application and making a recommendation, that they will be able to succeed. In other words, to persevere in that program, not to quit, and be able to go through graduate program. In other words, accept the responsibility and the rigors of a graduate program. If you can conceive that notion and be able to write a good letter of recommendation or present a good letter, that becomes much more seen, I should say, favorably as well, because you're documenting, you're expressing your confidence, but you're also convincing the reader that you're able to be able to go through the rigors of graduate programs. Let me make another point. Undergraduate education in the United States may not be as rigorous as some undergraduate programs, for example, in other countries. A graduate program in the United States is the best. As a result, the result of this is because we choose the students that come to graduate programs very, very carefully. So what you say, how you present yourself, and how confident you are in that presentation becomes an attractive element to admitting the particular student, but also in terms of the funding that may be available to that.
I think the last question I'll ask about admission and funding decision in regards to recommendation letters. Prof, technically speaking, or from experience, it is very difficult to get some of our professors to write these recommendation letters for us, because the student to lecturer ratio tries me to be like 1 to 300, one professor to 300 students. So we always struggle to get access to these professors. As a result, if you don't become a teaching assistant after, your 4 years to serve as, we call it national service back in Ghana. Nigerians call it NYSC. I don't know about other countries though. If you don't do that, it becomes difficult for you to get the recommendation letters. To keep it short, if an applicant, is getting a recommendation letter from a professor, a tutor, and the person is not having a doctoral degree, and someone is getting a recommendation from someone who is a professor, does that one put that applicant on a good pedestal than that one? Than the other applicant getting from a lower rank, tutor or lecturer?
My answer is yes, it does, and here is why. Not all letters of recommendations are equal. Some are more critical than others. Some people know how to write recommendation letters better than others. The wording that is used is critical. I write many recommendation letters to students. If I am not willing to write a letter for that person, and if I cannot write a very good letter, I will not volunteer to do it. But when I write those letters, I write them in such a way that the reader, the committee, or the individual is convinced of the viability of that particular student. So language is very important there. So I would say I recommend, or I could say I recommend this student without any hesitation whatsoever. These are different statements, and so make sure you select the people who write letters of recommendations for you. And to do that, how do you select that? Well, you have to develop individuals that are likely to write you letters of recommendation. You just can't go to somebody and say, write a letter of recommendation. They write it for you, but it may not be that helpful to you. So make sure that you have a relationship with the individual that is writing that letter for you, because it is critical in the final decision. It's like what they call the crown on the jewel, as they say, or the jewel on the crown, because those letters of recommendations become very, very critical in the final analysis. Because when everybody has great GPAs, when everybody has come out of good programs, good universities, and so on and so forth, then everything being equal, we look at the letter of recommendation and see the vigor, the strength of that letter of recommendation to push it forward.
Okay. So in a nutshell, just to add up, the rank of a professor doesn't really play much a role than the content.
The rank of the professor really doesn't make any difference as long as they are within that institution.
Okay.
But if you were to ask somebody outside to write it, it doesn't mean as much. Now, content is everything in a letter of recommendation. Content is absolutely critical, and you cannot produce good content on an artificial basis. The individual writing that letter for you has to understand you, has to know a little bit about you, has to have had communication with you to be able to identify not only how good you are, but perhaps convincing the reader, the potential reader, that this is a person they cannot pass up.
Okay, this is very good. I think I'm relieved now.